Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Let's talk about sequelitis and a sequel to a really good movie that was definitely not as good as its predecessor. National Treasure, excellent film. It came out in 2004, which I've always described as my lost year in cinema. It's when I was over in Spain. I wasn't going to the movies, and not everything that came out over here also got a European release. I didn't hear about it until the summer of '05, and I saw a poster at a video store somewhere, and the movie was just called La Búsqueda, just The Search. I don't know why it wasn't called Tesoro Nacional. That would have made sense to me anyway, but sometimes terms with a direct translation have a different context, so they must have had a reason for it. Anyway, saw it, loved it, fantastic film. It has stood up with the acting and the music and the cinematography. All of that is great, and because of its success, it naturally earned a sequel. And the sequel, while it was financially successful, I have yet to meet somebody who looks back on it with any kind of fondness. And so I tossed it on last week. I was watching it here and there. Freaking dishwasher went out, so we're hand washing everything. So throw my phone in the back of the sink and just do a whole ton of hand wash all at once. I finally finished it, and at first, man, like there were some hard parts to get through. There were some things about it to like, and you can definitely see what they were trying to echo from the first one. But unlike the first one, it wasn't all coming together. And man, this actually sent me over to IMDb to where I was looking at the writers' room for the first one and the writers' room for the second. There were one or two names that weren't there for the second movie, and then a whole bunch of the additions were on. Like here, I'm a character writer, I'm a story writer, I'm whatever. Like it seems like the two main people were there for both of them, but there were obviously enough additions and enough tonal changes and stuff to where, man, they messed up the formula to the extent that there was one. I didn't like right out of the gate that they undid a lot of the successes that the characters had. Uh, Ben and Abigail are having a fight, and she kicked him out of the house that he bought. Hmm. They weren't married. Hmm. And then Riley mismanaged his money, and he got a schlocky book deal, and he's getting audited by the IRS, and like everybody's miserable. I understand that you've got to give them a challenge to overcome, but I think the wrong way to go about that is to put them close back to where they were before they succeeded in the previous story, if that makes any sense. I guess the idea is to give them some reason to be driven enough to succeed. And with Riley's case in particular, like if he was financially comfortable, he wouldn't have had the motivation apparently to go with Ben on another treasure hunt. So they had to give him financial problems, even though he was a multimillionaire and has a book deal and all of that crap. It just seemed like it was a downer. You took the really upper ending of the first movie and you made it into a downer for the second one. Going back to the formula commentary, the first one was obviously uh, like a tonal recreation of the Revolutionary War. You had American good guys and British bad guys fighting over the Declaration of Independence. Like there was a thematic subtext to it. And with the second one, you had erstwhile northern good guys going up against very thickly southern accented bad guys, played by Ed Harris, who was the lead antagonist of the movie The Rock, starring none other than Nick Cage. So these two gentlemen have gone at it before on the silver screen. I'm going to stop doing that in character now. Ed Harris always plays a good villain, and he was used sometimes to good effect in this one. There were times when he was acting on conviction, and other times when it was just like, I'm written as the bad guy, see? So I'm going to be the bad guy, see? Or do that with a southern accent, I guess. Um, there were there were pieces of it that shone through, though, where you could tell that they were capturing the old magic in snippets here and there. One of the most impactful moments of the first film was when Ben and Riley are looking at the Declaration through the glass, and Ben reads the line of the Declaration that talks about, when despotism runs so rampant, it's incumbent upon men to cast off the old guard and make new arrangements for their future security. Like, I'm super paraphrasing that. He was inspired by the Declaration to do what nobody else was going to do. And that was a powerful moment. And Riley says, like, man, people just don't talk like that anymore. Ben's like, yeah, I'm going to steal the Declaration. I'm going to do what nobody else is going to do. And they touched on that very briefly again in the second one, after the scene where Ben has to kidnap the President of the United States. And, the world is, like, once again on tenterhooks as it waits for Ben to find another treasure, and he needs help from the President and his secret book in order to get it. And he says something dramatic to the President about, whether you, by your innate character or by the weight of history on you, I don't believe that you'll do the wrong thing in this moment, because you are the President. And the President, played by Bruce Greenwood, I don't think they ever actually say his name. He's just the President. He's like, people don't really believe in that anymore, Ben. And Ben says, but they want to. And it's one of those simple things, but when you hear it said in a story like this, like, you realize that you do want to. You don't want to necessarily put this fantastic level of faith and confidence in one individual politician, because they will always let you down, and they'll often laugh and get rich while they do it. But you want to have that belief and that confidence in the office. And you want to believe that whoever attains it will honor the weight of it. And like, there was a profound, almost spiritual truth to that. And they found ways to write that into both scripts. And even in the lesser script of the second movie, that moment shone through. Much in the same way that I didn't care for the second script breaking up Ben and Abigail, when they finally revealed what happened to Ben's mom, played by Helen Mirren, and she's a great actress, that was another one that was poorly written. Like, you find out that I got the implication from the first movie that she was dead, but no, like, we're going to actually write it in. We left that one open-ended enough. So she just got divorced from Patrick Gates, from John Voight's character, 30-something years ago. And you find out it's because, like, they were fighting over a toothbrush in a suitcase or something. Like, they were just... It was a dumb thing to try to get worked up over. And you could see the holes in the writing through the script, where there was some kind of direction to say, like, okay, show how they took a molehill and made it into a mountain. But it should have been more serious than it was, and they relied too heavily on bathos, on the inclination to do something comedic or ironic, and it just made the moment fall flat. Like, here's this older couple, Ben's parents, that are beefing, and as soon as they introduce them that way, it's like, okay, well, they're obviously going to find a treasure. This is national treasure. They're going to find a treasure, and everybody's going to make up and be happy and all that stuff. It was a lesser simulacrum of its greater predecessor. And that is, I think, often the case with sequels. It's like the movie adaptation of a book is very, very rarely ever better than the book itself. The same thing goes with sequels to unexpectedly successful first films. And as much as I've joked over the years about, like, man, I don't think they're ever going to do National Treasure 3, I'm kind of glad that they aren't. If I remember right, this was the first sequel that Nicolas Cage ever did. And it came out a couple of years later. He was having financial problems. Apparently whoever he hired to manage his money wasn't paying his taxes. Whoopsie. And so ironic that his first sequel ever featured a plot where his friend character was getting audited by the IRS for millions of dollars. Anyway, other elements that I think did shine through really well were, the idea of, why Mount Rushmore was carved, and it was because there was a secret city of gold, and the Confederates would have wanted it, and the Brits were waffling over whether or not to support the Confederates. The success of this one, and I guess the same thing is true of the first movie, The success of the second one could have been a little bit more dependent on detailed knowledge from the audience of these historical events. I hadn't read up on the Civil War when I first saw this movie as much as I have read now. I was only 23 at the time. And I was not aware of the extent to which Britain was actually considering like openly backing the Confederacy and giving them diplomatic legitimacy. Excuse me, and how their cash problems were part of the reason why. There was another factor where England was undergoing its own abolitionist movement at the time, and as much as a divided America would have benefited them financially and internationally and diplomatically and all that, backing the Confederacy would have thwarted that effort. And so, understandably, that factored into their reasoning for not getting so openly involved. I think trying to tie a Native American city of gold to a Civil War story and then moving it 140 years later, it was just, there was too much of a forced hand trying to capture the magic of the first one, but wrap it in the skin of a Civil War story, and then add in a few extra writers to give them credits, but they can't capture the magic that the first writer's room did. Like there were just, the more you peel back the layers of the onion, like the more you see the various factors that were working against the success of this movie. There were parts of it that were great. They were few and far between, and it just didn't give you the same feeling that the first one did. I remember walking out of the movie. I took my friend Corinne. She was my gym buddy at the time, and she's like, "Yeah, I admit I was really lost during that." And I was like, "Oh, why? Don't you remember what happened in the first movie?" And she's like, "There was a first one." I was like, "Well, this is called National Treasure 2." Like, yeah, she'd never even heard of National Treasure. I was like, "Wow, okay, whoopsie. I wish I would have known that." But anyway, like I hadn't seen it in coming up on almost 18 years, and after having watched it now for a second time, like I'm reminded of why. There's just not much there. The benefit of watching it now, though, is that a manuscript that I'm working on will also feature a presidential book and a quick visit to Mount Rushmore. And watching this, I realized like I might have been subconsciously channeling some of the more intriguing parts of it. So I've got to go back and change a couple of things in the book in the second draft. So there's a benefit to it in that regard. But yeah, there are times when a property can just become a victim of its own success, where people enjoy it so much that they want more, but the artist who created it might not have much more to offer or might need more time to cook something up. And I think that'll be the final point that I want to make here. When this movie would have been greenlit, when the first one would have been greenlit, was probably around 2001, 2002. I don't know when it was originally conjured up, but American patriotism and unity and rah-rahness and all that was at a pretty big high in the wake of 9/11. And so, like, hey, let's get this idea that we've had cooking up for a while. Let's put it into high gear. We can get it out during an election year when everybody's all rah-rah America. And on top of that, it's really, really good. They made a lot of money off of it. They greenlit a sequel. By the end of 2007, that mood had largely changed, and people were gearing up for a primary election cycle that was going to be very heated. Bush was constitutionally limited. He was also very unpopular. He had like a 35% approval rating. Cheney wasn't running, so the Republican primary was kind of wide open. And then on the Democrat side, like the heavy hitters were Hillary and Obama. And people weren't going to, I think, respond to something as culturally patriotic as a National Treasure movie, especially when one of the underlying themes was not steel manning, but just portraying anybody from the Confederacy in a good light. Mitch Wilkinson, the Ed Harris character, was a descendant, of a Confederate General Albert Pike. And like there were never any apologetics about the Confederacy or slavery or anything. And it's like, okay, it's cool that they just portrayed this as like, hey, I'm a descendant of the Confederacy and I'm proud of it, and nobody gave them any crap about it. They're still Americans. Slavery's over. It's good that it's over. Civil War was more complicated than that. Blah blah blah. But this movie came along at a time, I think, when audiences were moving away from the sentiments, at least for a while, that made the first one successful. You can make of that what you will. Anyway, as much as it would have been cool to see the third movie based on what they teased at the end of this one, I'm glad that they didn't go on to make one. Apparently, they made some Disney Plus show or series or something called Edge of History, where it was all about illegal immigrants or something. It's like, yeah, that after the age in which the sequel was made, it was past due to just put a fork in this thing and let it be done. Anyway, I rambled on quite longer than I intended to for commentary on a bad sequel to a great movie. If you have a differing opinion, I'm sure you'll let me hear about it in the comments. Drive safe. See you out there.